politics is everyone's concerned with like, are you on the left or are you on the right? And I try to sort of deconstruct both sides and show people like, well, there's flaws on both sides, and you gotta like see everything as like a picture, and don't see your neighbor as your enemy just because they're not your political affiliation. See them as like a person.
Right. I like. Now, with your book, what really inspired you to be brave enough to write one?
Well, you know what? I think one of the things that people do not realize is that when you are a gay person, that life can be hard in a lot of ways. But the biggest thing I noticed was there was a void in entertainment content for young gay men. That tends to be my audience, is gay guys, and then a lot of women. Usually women between like 30 and 50 I do well with, because the younger generation is politically insane, in my opinion. But I needed to write the book I needed as a young gay person. I needed to create that book. And it just wasn't there for me. It wasn't there for me growing up. I would watch TV shows, and I just, you can't be what you can't see. And so I would turn on TV shows and I wouldn't see myself reflected in a TV show or a book or a podcast or any of these things. And so I thought, well, maybe I need to create them for the younger generation. And so that's what I did with my old show. But with my book, I just wanted to do a memoir of 10 years of my life. It's a comedy book. It's completely and utterly outrageous. But it's showing you a person whose parents, particularly my dad, I will say, didn't teach me how to love, and what it's like for people like that who then go out in the world and start dating, and the damage that we bring and the baggage that we bring and the self-destruction that we bring. And so very much when you read my book, you see a 20-something self-destructing, and there's comedy in that. But I definitely wanted to illustrate through the 10 years is like where I'm at today, how I grew, the arc that I went through to sort of get where I'm at. And so that was the main motivation, is just like make people laugh, but also write a book for modern gay men. But, like it truly is a comedy book that like everyone that I know, like gay, straight, whatever, reads the book, because I think sometimes you just, you need that book where you're on vacation and you can just read it and sit by the pool and laugh. And that's very much what the book is.
Ooh, nice. Now you just made me want to get a copy. I haven't read it, but
it's outrageous. As long as you can handle like vulgar outrageous, you'll be good.
Ooh, that definitely sounds catchy. Now, do you find yourself wanting to write another?
I've started the second book, but I got to be honest, like it is such a brutal process, and you really have to have all your faculties in order, because I think with the pandemic and mentally it's tough. You really have to be at your 100% if you're going to sit down and write a book, because it will suck everything out of you. It's not just like you write it and whatever, there's rewriting, there's deleting chapters, there's adding chapters. And I don't know if I really have that much juice in me right now, just because I feel really dejected with what I feel is like authoritarian rule that we're under, in which we're told where we can go, how much money we can make, who we can see. It's a scary time. So I think when we get out of that, maybe I'll be able to finish my second book. But right now I really just want to focus on my show, because I'm in that process where I'm trying to add, thousands and thousands of new listeners. And I'm just finding new ways to do that. And it's a lot of work itself. And I also I think if people are going to tune into me every week, I really work hard at what I say on the show. I make sure I know what I'm talking about, because I want that credibility. So my main focus now is going to be Unmentionable, and then I'll try and tackle the book on the side. But yeah, it's a brutal process. Anyone listening to this, it's like, I'm not trying to talk them out of writing a book, but just make sure that you for sure can carve out the time and that mentally you're in the space to do it.
Yeah. I had someone tell me, you should write a book. You've done a lot of stupid crap and fun crap. So you should write one. And I'm like, ooh, what I hear and what my hands want to do when it hits a pen or a pencil, I'm like, that's a lot of work. I don't know if I'm up for that.
Well, what you have to do is, like, when you write it, my biggest tip, if you're going to write it, is just don't care. You can't write a book caring what people think about you. it really has to be this emotional catharsis. Like you have to just sit down and say, I'm just going to write exactly what's on my mind. I'm just going to put every thought out there. Like it really is like, it's like bleeding on the paper. You really just leave it all there. And you're really vulnerable, and you have to get over that mentality of just like, God, is someone going to read this and think I'm vulgar or gross or offensive or whatever that it is? And you just have to kind of, good writers really just say, this is where I'm at, and love me for me. And I think if people like listening to you, or like they know you, they might learn an entirely different side of you. Like my best friends read my book and they're like, I've been your best friend for 10, 20 years, and I learned so much about you. And I thought that was really one of the coolest things about that.
Oh, that's really cool. That is so cool. Yeah.
It's scary. It's definitely a scary, scary thing, right? To just show the world your soul and say, here you go.
Right. That's totally it. Like it's fully unleashed. Here is everything, every secret I've never told you. Here's how I really feel. And
Yeah.
that's really brave, especially for you to write a book about like your life and
my sex life particularly, which is even scarier.
Yeah, that's really private.
Yeah, it's all out there now. But you know what? It's like once it's out there, it's just like it's so freeing, because you're just like, oh, I put it all out there, and I thought it was scary, and then everything was okay. And actually everything was better than I thought it was going to be.
Oh, that's awesome. That is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Did you write the book before having a podcast, or did it come hand in hand?
I had the podcast was taken out, so I had different people, like when the podcast started taking off, different people approached me about the book, like different publishers and stuff like that. And so it was always like, because they always want to capitalize on you if you have a fan base, right? Because that's the whole thing about writing. It's like a lot of people just, they write, but your writing is nothing if you don't have an audience, if you can't create an audience. And so I naturally had this audience of like 20,000 people were listening to episodes of our podcast, and so they see money. So that's why they approach you. And so, but what I really noticed in that process is that like they really try to make you into something you're not, because when any businesses, they try to like package you, right? So they come to you and they're like, okay, we want you to write you a book, but it's not really about how you see yourself. It's how they see you as a product. And so they very much initially wanted me to write a book that was very like more like what you would write, like motivational, like they wanted me to write like something that was very like Oprah, like just sort of like heartfelt, blah blah blah. And that's just, I'm a comedian, like I'm a vulgar comedian. And so for what I was doing on my podcast and what my audience expected of me, they would, if I wrote that book, they would be like, huh? Like it didn't fit at all with my brand. But I think they know that books like that do well, and they know they sell well, and that's what people want. And so there was a big fight on that. And at the end of the day, I just sort of said, I'm a comedian. Like my job is to make people laugh. Like that's why I'm on earth. And if I can't write a comedy book, I don't see the point in writing a book, because I'm not even using my talent in writing jokes and telling stories. I'm just sort of trying to motivate people in a certain way. And that's just not what I'm good at. And so I learned a lot in that process of like what the book publishing industry wants you to be and what sells and what does well. But at the end of the day, the route that I went ended up being great. I mean, my book has phenomenal reviews and people love it, but it is outrageous. It's completely and utterly outrageous. But, you know, people ask me why I write about these things, and I write about them because they happen.
Right. You can't write about something you don't know or didn't experience.
Yeah, it's like someone's like, oh my God, why did you write about like that crazy sex story that you wrote about in your book? And I'm like, because it happened. It's like we all go to brunch with our friends or have these wild conversations with our friends where we're told that like, don't talk about that. That's so bad, or that's secret, or like sex is bad. And then like billions of people have had sex. And I've always found that so odd. I think because a lot of my friends are sex workers. Like I'm friends with a lot of like porn stars and strippers and people of OnlyFans, stuff like that. And I've always just found them to be the most wonderful, warmest people I've ever met in my life. And so I've learned a lot by knowing those people, that like sex isn't like a terrible, weird thing that we have to just like not talk about and keep secret. And and that it's evil and bad to talk about it. And so that's the way I live my life. And that's like what I've done through podcasting. I just sort of just put it all out there, and you'd be surprised how many people love it and want to hear it.
Right. But yet are too ashamed or, feel some type of way to be like, no, I don't want to hear it, but I really do.
Yeah, because it's like why not? I mean, especially if you can't talk with your friends about like dating and sex, then who are you going to talk to about that? And I
Yeah.
think with podcasting, it's so personal, right? So people like, it's the most personal medium. Like, people thought they knew me as their friend. They considered me their friend. I would meet them in person and they would be like, I feel like we're best friends, like, all the time. And that's a unique bond that you have through a podcast with your audience that I don't think anyone understands. Like, I mean, we think we know like J Lo or Reese Witherspoon or all these people that we think we know, but like that's a product. Like, that's a person who is meant to talk in a certain way and isn't really sharing with you who they are. And so I think podcasting, it's like the most raw and vulnerable version of yourself, and you're giving it to your audience. And in that sense, you have a much tighter connection with your audience than any other medium.
Definitely. Now, with your podcast and your book, do you think like you discovered part of yourself through all three of them? The two podcasts and then your book?
Yeah, I mean, for the first podcast, I just discovered that like I could put everything out there and everything was okay, but that like it was inspirational for people. I mean, we had people come out of the closet. We had people who knew they were gay, but they ended up leaving their wives because they were just realized that they were lying to themselves. We had a gay priest leave the priesthood because he realized he was gay. Like, we created so much social change that really wasn't intended. Like, we thought it was just two guys being silly, talking about whatever in my friend's apartment, and it became this huge thing. And then with my new show, it's a much broader show. It's not a gay podcast. My audience is actually probably predominantly straight people at this point, but my new show is called Unmentionable because so many of the times in our society we don't elevate certain voices, and you don't see certain people in the mainstream media because we're taught that there's something wrong with them or we shouldn't hear from them. So the kind of guests that I've had on my show are like strippers, porn stars, a friend of mine who was an illegal immigrant, like he just came to Canada and he just stayed. Just really unique, wild stories that you don't really hear anywhere. And so I think we're in a cool lane with our show, and that like, no, you don't really get like, our show doesn't really exist elsewhere. It's really just like a certain types of people come on the show and they tell you, and you learn about people and you laugh, and we don't take ourselves very seriously. And then at the same time, I just get to be completely and utterly outrageous and basically scream in the microphone and tell ridiculous jokes. And that's what I love. I love the ability to like make people laugh. And people will message me all the time and say, my mom died. Like, I had someone message me the other day saying their mom died of COVID and they couldn't get out of bed, but like they've just been listening to my show and laughing. And I mean, that's like, to me, is like why I'm on earth. Like, that's my purpose. And as much as I hate comedy at times, it's like, wow, what a gift that I could help that person out of bed and make them laugh for the first time.
Nice. That's awesome. That is cool how you're using your gift. There's a lot of people that are either too embarrassed or don't know what to do or procrastinators. And especially at this time, they're like, well, I can't do anything. There's nothing for me to do. I don't know how to, but you're totally honing in and using your gift to make it good.
It's, well, you know what? People who say that are probably, there's a fire. And I think that's why I don't really like certain things, because I don't think you can teach people the fire. Like, it's like you said you wanted to do a podcast and you just got out there and you did the podcast. But how many people do you know that just talk about something for 3-4 years and they just never do it, right? And I think you have to have that ingrained feeling in you to say, like, I want to create something and I'm going to create something. And I think at this point in my life, I'm 34. I've had, great career before this and different things like that. But when it comes to comedy, it's just like, this is my only option now. This is the only thing that makes me happy. It's the only thing that like gets me out of bed. It's the only thing that like truly excites me. And so I just want to do this for as long as I can on this earth, and continue to get better and continue to get more fans and just kind of keep growing, because it's like, there's no other options for me at this point. I mean, it's like, nothing else will give me any sort of joy like this. And so it's like, well, I guess I just have to do this now.